a landscape transfigured, thrust upward and buckled by millions of years of enormous force. The Earth pushed up high and straight along the continental divide. The stone rose as it had lain in the earth. East of the divide, the rocks were thrust sideways, driven over so that one layer pushed against or overshot another. A chaos of bent and broken stone. The power that pushed the mountains above the surrounding landscape subsided. For millions of years, the rock skeletons stood, polished and fissured by wind and water. Then, a slight drop in temperature set in motion another massive grinding transformation. Huge tongues of ice inched down the mountains, invading steep-walled valleys, carving them round. Retreating, the great rivers of ice dumped their burden of stone. Boulders to stud the high valleys, mounds of till to mark the path and distance the ice had traveled. Torrents of meltwater ripped through the rock debris, reworked the shapes the ice had carved. A succession of glaciers, advancing, retreating, changing the face of these mountains forever. Colors, textures, moods of mountain, commingling on this fractured landscape. Poet Sid Marty writes, "Each mountain its own country, in the way a country must be, a state of mind. Each mountain where local climate controls the shade of paintbrush and anemone. Colors and moods vary as the weather. Suddenly." The mountain rampart is a barrier between sea and plain, reaching toward the sky. Pacific air, forced up over the mountains, surrenders its moisture to the highest peaks. The masterful orchestration of climate by landform. Along the continental divide, where the fall of snow and rain is greatest, the forests are rich with tangled life, a moist and shadowy lushness. There is less moisture in the winds that sweep through the eastern ranges and beyond. Thompson's frozen ocean does not subside suddenly into plain. The forces that threw the mountains high created smaller folds, foothills, before they were spent. In the south, sun and wind dry the hills. Douglas fir and limber pine cling to rock outcrops and shelter on slopes away from the sun. In the moister, cooler climate to the north, the folds of rock are dressed in continuous forest. The change in climate from west to east, from south to north, creates a vast array of habitats, a variety compounded as climate changes from valley floor to mountain top. Air, forced to climb these walls of rock, expands and cools. The peak of the mountain can be a barren winter crag. The foot, a lush summer valley. Verdant forest, divided by the path of snow and water, woven round each wetland. The forest, so nearly continuous, is altered subtly with each change of slope, with altitude, soil, landform. In the drier and warmer lower valleys, repeated fire invites a forest of lodgepole pine. Where streams have deposited coarse materials, the aspen grow, warmed by the sun. Higher up, in the cooler, moister subalpine, fir and spruce prevail. Moss-carpeted forests, cool and shady, earth renewed by the rot of fallen timber. Altitude commands dramatic changes. From a distance, the forest seems to stop suddenly, but nature's way is seldom so abrupt. At higher altitude, where the rigors of climate will no longer allow a continuous forest, the trees begin to break into islands, timberline. Trees and shrubs that grew high and straight on the lower slopes become short and gnarled, crumholts or crooked wood. Ground-hugging clumps sheltering against the icy winds. Plants adapting to the demands of local climate. Animals preferring the farthest borders of the forest. Higher still, and the limits for tree life are passed. The alpine zone. Plants grow low to the ground, reducing their exposure to the harsh conditions. Life, equipped for the short growing season, adapted to the extremes of sunlight, wind, and cold. Altitude at last creates a climate where almost nothing can live. A desert in the sky, an eternity of winter. Where snow falls and cannot melt, it gradually turns to ice. Glaciers are born. These are the shrunken remnants of the Ice Age glaciers that left their deep and lasting mark. Now, withered tongues of ice hanging in clefts of rock, moving in answer to climate's command. Ancient patterns of change, repeated in miniature with every cycle of seasons. Moisture, forced to earth by the mountain contour, now drawn down by gravity. The first stage, and a long journey to the sea. Water ceaselessly carving the bedrock, sculpting on scales both grand and delicate. Subtly, the conditions of light and moisture alter. And so too, the dialogue between landform and life. Landscape. Evolution wrought by the forces of change. What nature leaves unstable, gravity brings down. A destructive moment? Perhaps. But for poet Sid Marty, a poetic moment also. Soon, the avalanche must roll down its accustomed paths, where only alder bushes grow, long forecast by the shifting view of rocks, of wars that all must end with gravity and power. Here, in this wintry hour, and without, in the flowering cold. Destruction carries with it the seeds of rebirth, a never-ending process of colonization and succession. Changes are forced upon these timeless patterns, and each great change forces thousands of smaller changes. Man is here, and man will stay. But hopefully, there will always be places where nature is allowed to dance her ancient dance in peace. The mountains rule the lands they overshadow. Barrier to the Pacific, they allow cold Arctic air to penetrate farther, controlling the southern limits of the boreal forest. Air, robbed of rain in high ranges, rolls warm and dry over the southern prairie. Rivers, born of snowmelt and receding glacier, carve their way across the continent to empty into distant oceans. By wind and river, the mountains reach out to other landforms. The shapes of land respond with a bounty of life. Sid Marty writes, "But it's hard to draw the boundary, imaginary line that cuts the watersheds. You gotta know the ground, climb the crumbling mountain walls to know which way the rivers run. Headwaters, where the world begins."